Hi, Julie here. Been asked by a couple of people to do a bit of a walkthrough on how I created Come Fly With Me. So I thought I would just pop into Photoshop and just do a quick little video. So this is the final image, which I'm sure you will agree is a far cry from the original. Which is this one, and even this has been photoshopped a little bit to cover up some of the graffiti and so forth. So this is the image. This is Rochelle. She's standing on a stool, just on one foot with one foot out, and the wind was actually blowing her hair and the balloons that way. And she had pulled her skirt and sort of flew it, so it looked like she's sort of standing in midair. So that's the image that I worked with, and what I did was I put a mask on and just carefully went around and got rid of everything else in the shot. Now I'm just going to drop back a bit to what was in the background. So I had a stormy sky, which was just one of my stormy sky shots that I've got, and then I had this particular image, which is in the hills around Lake Tekapo in New Zealand. I probably pronounced that wrong. And I also then painted some grass. This is just with a grass brush. So don't even know if I can find it again. That might take me a little while. There is some bird brushes as well that I used a bit later. I've got so many brushes, trying to find something is a bit of a joke, but this isn't necessarily the right brush that I use, but it's something similar. I just grabbed a paint color from sampled in the background and just painted that on, like so. So yeah, so that's that. I then, and that of course was clipped to the bottom layer. There were a few different curve layers and things like that that I did to adjust the color in the background. This one is the shadow that falls on the ground below my model, and then we're back to the base image that we had. So I did a bit of a brightness contrast layer on here. So I dropped the brightness because she was a little bit too bright. So I dropped that back, and I also did a curves layer which brought the light up over her. Now you think they might be, you know, sort of interacting with each other, but she had bright highlights and dark shadows, so doing it this way allowed me to even the light out a little bit. And then I also just painted some red. This is just clipped to the layer below again, so what that does, I can just paint it on and then I can just clip it and it will only attach itself to the balloons. Oh, sorry, I was telling a big fib before. That's the shadow there. So I've just taken the original image and I have done a layer mask. So I've masked everything else out but the shadows. And then we started playing with some different colors and a gradient map. Gradient map as opposed to an actual gradient. A gradient puts colors over the top, whereas a gradient map actually applies it to your shadows and highlights, so it does make a slight difference. I just went in and picked, I can't even remember which one it was now. I think it was, if I just get rid of that layer, and then I come into here. So the gradient map I selected was one of these photographic ones, and then applied it with soft light and dropped it down to 55%. At 100% it was too much. I then merged everything onto a new layer and I took it into exposure X3. I don't know if you use exposure, but I just did a glamour shot halation, which slightly desaturated it and added quite a bit of a glow to it. So I'm hoping you can see the difference between that. And then of course I added the birds in. Like I said, it was just one brush, so I just stamped them on in black, and then I changed it to multiply and dropped it down to 67% because it was a bit too strong. I then added some light just in the middle of the image, and what that was is just some white paint, and I do this frequently, whether it's a blob or lines or whatever. I'll paint that in just in white, place it where I want it to be, put it into screen mode, and then drop it down to sort of 10 to 15%, something like that, and that gives you a bit of light through their area that you want it. If you were to do paint in stripes, which I frequently do as well, to get like the sun rays, I would apply a Gaussian blur to it so that they don't look like paintbrush strokes. And then this little move here, which is actually one of my actions, this is Cinematic 2. This is one that I've made for myself because I use it all the time, and it's 3 different color lookup tables. I don't know if you use them or not. Just in here, color lookup, and that's just added a 4th one, but you've got loads of different ones here. You can make your own, you can purchase them, you can get them all over the place, but I just use 3 standard ones, which is tension green and candlelight. Both of these are dropped at soft light at 20%. I also do a foggy night, which I've left at normal, but I dropped down to 20% as well. And then I also do a colour fill. This is just a dark navy blue, which I set to exclusion at about 20%, and what that does is it desaturates my shadows and puts some blue into them. Just gives it sort of a bit more of a hazy sort of look to it. I then applied Vermilion, which is a fine art action by Bella Kotak, which I then set to 63%. Having it up at 100% was just too much. I then did a high pass filter. I did 2 of them. One I did on the background layer, and then I removed most of it. So I've got, all I've got really is the grass in the foreground, the sheep, and some of the hills, which I have kept with some high pass sharpening, and just set that to overlay. And then I did another layer with her dress, and what this does is it gives all the really great detail in the dress and the balloons and so forth. Oops, I just accidentally put that on dissolve. Should have been on normal, but anyway, so I'll set that back to overlay. So that's where I get the details and everything from. If you've never done a high pass filter before, drop back to one of your basic images and just do a copy of it. Control J. Sorry, my J key is a bit buggered at the moment. It's not working. So I'll just come up here and I'll do a duplicate layer of it, and I'll grab that copy and I'll just pull it all the way up the top. You do know that you can move stuff around in your layer stacks, yeah. Oh, come on. Okay, so I'm just going to pop that there. So I'm just going to apply that layer mask to that image, and if we come into other, high pass, and it's up to you where you want to drag it. Generally speaking, I usually only use 2 to 3 pixel radius, but on this one, because everything's fairly soft and muted, I did bring it up to 9.6. So that's what I did on that one. So I'll just get rid of that for the moment, and then just set it to overlay. I then put in a couple of texture layers, just setting them to overlay, soft light, things like that. I did add a layer mask, and I deleted it off her body and the balloons because I didn't like what it was doing to her. See, if I do that, it was adding a bit too much brightness back into her and muting the colour of the dress down, so I didn't like that on her. I then did another lighting effect. This one's actually one of the ones out of my lighting pack, and I'll just show you at normal. So that's it there. So I put it on. It's just a black and white image, so putting it on screen will automatically drop the black out. I also blurred it as well. I do suggest people blur image to suit what they're doing when they put one of my overlays in, and then I dropped the opacity down on this one. I then put in some more curve layers. This one is set to multiply and dropped it down to 25%, so that just sort of darkened everything up a little bit. And then this one I did a vignette, so I just grabbed the lasso tool and selected the area that I wanted to, oops, moving things that I shouldn't have, selected the area that I wanted to apply the vignette to, and then I dropped down my the shadows in a curves layer. I then did another layer, merged it all up together, and I brightened off the front a little bit. I then did another curve layer and I brightened up the sheep a little bit as well. And still just playing around with curve layers. So that's where you can see the sheep brightened up. I then did a slight autumn effect, which I was playing around with, but I did drop it down to 32%. At 100% it was way too dark. I then put a black and white adjustment layer on, so coming into here and put a black and white layer. Now if you put a black and white layer and you set it to luminosity, you can then come in and you can adjust each of the colours individually. So you can boost the reds up when my computer catches up, to whatever you're happy with. Yellows is generally for skin colour, the greens in the grass, blues in the sky, etc, etc. So you can play around with all of those. So that's pretty much the finished image. I've probably altered it when I was mucking around moving things, so that's what we started off with. So yeah, so that's how I put together Come Fly With Me, and I'll catch you later. Bye for now.